office.
Wow, pretty powerful, isn't it? Is Sid Thomas here? May I invite? Thank you so much. This is Superintendent Sid Thomas from Representative. I'm going to stop talking until I mess this up even more. Thank you.
You're doing just fine. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm when I said representative, I'm going to speak for him in terms of his what he prepared speech that he's given me. I'm his voice.
Okay,
All
I
right.
gotcha.
But first, I think I'd like to tell you who I am. Uh, I come into this before I do anything else. Let's give Gina one big hand again. That was fantastic. Well, I'm family, and here's how I became family. More than going back beyond 1984, I met Gail through my daughter, who's sitting in the audience. She was my daughter's teacher, and she was just a fantastic person. We met her, and she became our family. We became her family. So, looking back 40 years, all I can tell you, and then we meet Gina, and that's when it really got to be a lot of fun because Gail was happy. Gail had a partner. Gail had a friend, had a supporter. You know, it makes a difference when you meet a complete person, when you meet a complete two people that love each other and have loved each other. We've had a great time over the years. And so I got the honor of being on the program by being asked to be the reader of Sid Thompson's words. So I'm not going to overstay my welcome because I could stay up here all day talking about Gina. So I'm just going to kind of read what I was told to read. Okay? And this is his speech. During the 1980s, I had the position of LAUSD Deputy Superintendent of Operations and the Superintendent of the district in the 90s during that period of time. I made efforts to listen to staff and could show how the district helped or hurted the environment for learning, for young people learning and getting the recommendations on how to live and change their lives. During all of this, my secretary informed me that a high school director named Virginia Uribe wished to speak with me regarding an urgent matter. I was aware of Mrs. Uribe's position as a high school counselor during her involvement with the LGBT young people and asked the secretary to please bring her in. When we met, I immediately was impressed with her knowledge and her commitment to the young people. Virginia spoke of had glowing awareness of the conditions that existed for students learning in the environment, that they were getting harassed, they were being demeaned, and they were being treated unfairly. I informed her that I shared the concerns, because it happened to me twice for two members of my family. She then said to me that these issues have manifested themselves in many ways, including, sadly, suicidal rates increasing. She shared with me the numbers of people that have died because of their condition. I was deeply shocked. She then spoke of the lack of knowledge about this situation with all of the staff. She said to me, we should make moves to be aware that others are not just aware of this, but are deeply involved and concerned with solutions. We spoke at meetings we could hold. We spoke of meetings we could hold with the appropriate staff to enlighten them. We also referenced information that should be shared and disseminated. Virginia was to the point for all of these things and chaired many of the meetings. Looking back, at my association with Virginia and the humanity that she showed I was most moved. It was her deep concern and for the well-being and significant part of her uh, position about life. That moved me so that I can say that I was happy to be knowledgeable about Virginia and her commitment for the importance and her deep concerns for the well-being of others. I'm honored to have given you what Sid Thompson felt from his heart. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Goldberg, it is a pleasure to welcome you back. Thank you. Jackie Goldberg. So happy to have her back at Illinois Unified. Never left our hearts, but now she's back in the chair again. Oh my goodness, my goodness. So for those of us old enough to remember, Dr. Uribe started before ACT UP, before Queer Nation, before there was a lot of talk about the LGBTQ community at all. But even before that, she was the person that the African American students at Fairfax High School looked to for help. In the 1960s, there was no African American faculty at Fairfax, and they went to Gina Uribe to be their advisor. But then in 1984, she started a little lunchtime group. Now, lest you think that this was easy, let me tell you that the world was about to fall upon her. I mean, literally. I mean, not just Lou Sheldon, and not just all of the folks that you can think of that went crazy and bizarre things began to happen. But she would get hate mail, she would get death threats, she would get the kinds of things said to her that you would not believe another human being would say to anybody, much less a teacher or a counselor at Fairfax High School. Didn't seem to bother her, although she kept calling me. And she said, well, you know, we need to do more than this. And I said, well, gee, we're doing this. And she said, no, we need to do more than this. There's AIDS, you know. And I said, well, yeah, I know there's AIDS. She said, well, you know, we need to have a brochure sent to every home of every student in every language in LAUSD about how you get AIDS and how you don't get AIDS. And I said, really? Who's going to write such a thing? So we put together a group of nurses and a group of health practitioners and some people from AIDS Project LA. And Dr. Uribe wrote a very interesting little document to parents saying, you know, there's a crisis here and we want you to know your kids can't get AIDS from sitting next to a kid with AIDS or going to a class that a teacher has AIDS. But here's the way you can get it. And then the brochure describes anal and oral sex in 26 languages. Honest to God, we sent it out. It took us weeks to convince the school board that they would somehow survive describing anal and oral sex in a brochure from the district to the parents. But we came to a very clear conclusion. And that very clear conclusion was, if you don't tell people how not to get it, they'll continue getting it. And if you can't talk the words, then you're just going to say, oh, I'm embarrassed, let them die. I mean, those were sort of the choices. But it was not an easy choice to send that little bulletin out in all of those languages, literally to every single parent in the school district. Oh my God. Well, along the line that we were doing this, Lou Sheldon's club found a book in Gina Uribe's library in her classroom. She had assembled a bunch of books for gay and lesbian kids, or even questioning kids, to be able to read, coming out stories and things like that. Well, the first thing that Lou Sheldon did was to say the coming out stories were advocacy. And I do remember Gina's response. She said, let me see, we're the most hated, maligned, underserved, despised, unprotected, unlawed by, and she would list a whole bunch of things, group left in America, and you're saying that we can recruit people to something like that? Really? Are you serious? Who would volunteer to join us? She did have quite a wit. I used that line for years, of course attributing it to her, but I used it for years because it is true. I mean, it seems like kind of crazy to advocate for a group that doesn't do so well amongst people. She then went on to say it was time for us to distribute condoms. I said, you do have to be kidding. But by the end of I think about 90 or 91, we began putting condoms in restrooms in our high schools. And I want to just point out that Julie Kornstein is here, and she was a board member during that time. And along with Roberta Weintraub, who I, did this with for many years, and a bunch of others, we really did quite a good job. Because really the crisis came in March of 1988. Right-wing Republican Marion LaFollette actually got the Republican caucus of the state legislature to vote to withhold all funds to LA Unified until the board killed Project 10. Literally to withhold 100% of our funding, and at the time, the Republicans controlled the legislature and the governor. Well, that was a crisis. And instead, I'm proud to say that all 7 members of the LAUSD Board of Education, Republican and Democrat alike, invited Dr. Uribe to the board, presented her with a scroll and honored her for the work she had done, and told the legislature publicly at our meeting that if they wanted to come after us, they had better be prepared for a fight, because all 7 of us were standing behind her in Project 10. I got several lovely letters from Archbishop Mahoney. One of which in which he quoted something, I think from Matthew or something, I'm not sure which it was, but told me that if a person was leading people into sin, they should have something put around their neck and dropped into the ocean and drowned. And I wrote him back that he who is without sin should cast the first stone. He was later to also come after Roberta Weintraub and I when we did the first 4 school-based health clinics, all of which gave out on campuses prophylactics for both girls and boys. So basically, who was Gina Uribe? Well, she was a good friend. But she was a person who, every time you said yes to her, had another demand. So first we had one sign, and then she wanted to sign up in the counselor's office in every high school that said, here's where you can come from Project 10. She wanted UTLA to give classes that she would teach, and they did. That was the teachers' union. She wanted the board to pay some money. We were pathetic, $6,000. It was pathetic, but we did. She wanted us to recruit counselors and nurses and teachers in every middle and high school to start Project 10 organizations, and we did. She wanted us to have an AIDS policy that was the only one in the entire nation, and it was a 7-0 vote on the board again, which said that AIDS is a medical issue, not a social or a political issue, but a medical issue, and that the needs of a person with AIDS, because we didn't know about HIV yet, we just called everything AIDS, the person with AIDS, whether they were a teacher, a student, or any other member of the district's employees, would not be not only not outed as a person with AIDS, but in addition, would only have any change to their assignment as a student or as a teacher if there was a medical reason to do so. And you have to understand what was going on at the time. School districts around the country were putting out teachers and throwing out students who they thought might have AIDS. They were throwing them out of school, firing them for their jobs, and a 7-0 vote introduced this policy. Now, it was after 4 days of hearings in which you can't imagine all of the things every one of us was called, but we did it anyway. I say this to you because courage is contagious. And it really was Gina's courage that we all caught. I don't think it was on anybody's agenda, including mine, to do any of this. Although I will say that I'm probably still the only school board member that did a gay bar tour while running for office. And really all I did was stand up on the bar and say, do you remember what it was like being in high school? Don't you want that to change? Aren't you willing to do something about it? And a lot of those folks did. So we're not done yet. I'd like to say to you that, oh, if she did it and we're all thrilled and everybody's fine, but I still get reports all the time from kids getting harassed. I still get reports occasionally, less often, from teachers getting harassed. We cannot allow this to go on, and we must continue to stay together, stick together, and make sure that whenever we hear of any of these things, that we do something about it. And now the transgender community is coming into its own, and it is getting even more harassment and really destructive behavior against them than LGBTQ folks have. So we have to be protective. And I would be remiss if I didn't end by saying this to Gail. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I went to that Huntington Park High School where she was teaching health and went to that class with one of those brochures, as I recall, and I have to say I turned orange and pink and yellow because I do embarrass also when describing anal and oral sex. What can I say? So it wasn't easy, but I want to say from there and from all of the things that you did and for the love and the tremendous love that you gave to Gina and to her family and your family, and for all the things that you're still doing for Project 10, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Oh, by the way, if you want to help children in LAUSD, vote yes on EE Tuesday.
Thank you. And courage is courageous. Thank you so much. Maria Slotchuk from... Here she comes! Hi!
I am Mariette Sawchuk, president of PFLAG Los Angeles, which, yay! Most of you here know that means parents, families, and friends allied with the LGBTQ community. And PFLAG and Dr. Virginia Uribe were natural allies. And why is this? Because there are two critical environments if LGBTQ youth are going to thrive. And the first one is the home, and the second one is the school. And things work better when both of them are in sync with each other and students thrive. PFLAG has been handling the home part of this equation since it began here in 1976. And almost immediately, PFLAG members began to talk about the horrors of school, about brutal bullying, about shaming by teachers, about administrations that were at best indifferent and at worst antagonistic. And parents would say, what can we do? It's like running into a brick wall. No one is listening to us. Virginia Uribe was a teacher. She watched all this going on in schools, in classrooms, at lunchtime, in PE, and she got fed up with it. And she began, with incredible courage and perseverance, to take down that wall brick by brick, starting in her own classroom and spreading all the way up to the Project 10 office in LAUSD administration. You've heard a little bit about how that has happened, and I won't go into that. What I'm going to say is she really knocked holes in that brick wall, and parents are now, things are not perfect, but parents are now able to have allies on school campuses and advocates in the administration, and that is a game changer. Does it matter? You bet it matters. And I have just one example to give you. I got an email through my PFLAG email from a mother whose child, a transgender middle school boy, was enrolled in a school that was not an LAUSD school. He was about to be expelled because he was wearing the clothes appropriate to his gender identity. The mother had tried to meet with the administration, to educate them about his needs, to make compromises so that her child would be comfortable, but the school would also be comfortable. She got agreements over and over again. The school violated those agreements. And then they told her that in 5 days he was going to be expelled because he was wearing his gender-appropriate clothing. She said to me, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? I picked up the phone. I called the Project 10 office. I talked to a Project 10 specialist, and I said, here's the story. Is there anything we can do? It's not in the district. And he said, we can't put pressure on the schools. We can't put pressure on the school district, but we can give this woman some advice. I hung up the phone. I crossed my fingers. 1 week later, I got a telephone call from him saying that the woman had indeed gone to that expulsion meeting. And because of his intervention, she had gone with an attorney from the ACLU. Project 10. That one intervention transformed the trajectory of that young person's life. And I think every day in the LA City, in LA County, and in other districts that have adopted the Project 10 model, interventions are going on. Small interventions, maybe a teacher talking to a student, and big interventions from the school district itself. You know, the Virginia Uribe's impact on LGBTQ youth is incalculable. Can I say that? Incalculable. There are thousands, there are 10,000s of these small interactions going on all the time. We cannot overestimate the impact she's had on families and LGBTQ youth. PFLAG members all over the city were saddened to hear that about Virginia's passing. You know, we feel diminished when some of our LGBTQ pioneers are gone. And I know that many of you are feeling dispirited. I have a suggestion for you. I suggest that some of you come and volunteer at Models of Pride in October. And you will see the enthusiasm of the kids, the excitement, the pride, the confidence that they have. That is thanks to Virginia Uribe. Her legacy is all around us, and the best way we can commemorate it and thank her is to continue her work.
There are angels that walk amongst us. I was an open and out gay boy by the time I was 13 years of age. Living in Los Angeles, California in the 80s provided me with a freer society than other parts of the United States to be who God intended me to be. However, it was never easy. In junior high, the bullying was a daily event. Food thrown at me, milk poured down my back, being beaten up on a semi-weekly basis. My parents were divorced. I was in the adult world as my father raised me like a roommate. I was introduced to nightclubs with a fake ID and began to escape the pain with self-expression of makeup and clothes as a little new wave phenomenon. At times with my father on school nights, I was out at the Troubadour on Santa Monica Boulevard, the Roxy on Sunset, or the Whiskey A Go-Go. It wasn't long before I began to go out on my own to clubs and bars in West Hollywood in defiance of the bully. Being determined to live with a vengeance and scream, "I am who I am," to the world. The level of my self-expression added fuel to the fire of my extremely difficult experience in school. Trying to make grades while coping with the anxiety of daily violence and physical abuse was overwhelming. I began to pray high school would change things. It did. I spoke of Fairfax High School in Melrose in West Hollywood immediately, as I was already taking the bus and hanging out on Melrose. I had a sense of the fact being gay in West Hollywood was not an issue. My therapist was quick to inform my father and myself that in New York City there existed the Harvey Milk High School, and in West Hollywood at Fairfax High there was Project 10. This was an in-school program to counsel LGBTQ students with a zero tolerance for bullying and violence. I was there in less than a week at the ripe old age of 14. Glendale was only 17 miles from Fairfax High School, but with the only transport being LA City Transit buses, the commute was huge. It took 2.5 hours in the morning to get to school and up to 3 hours to return home. I was 2 years from being eligible for a driver's license. That's how bad I wanted peace and a chance. Miss Uribe offered me unconditional love and support. She embraced me into Project 10, and our lives at Fairfax were heavily interwoven. I began to be her teacher's assistant, and that was an experience in of itself. She asked me to join her in being the face of Project 10 for the news and the media. My makeup began to calm down, my clothes turned into the uniform Southern California surfwear and sweats. The safety I began to experience with Project 10 and Miss Uribe began to build my foundation and establish my equilibrium. We flew to Washington, D.C. and filmed one of the first news shows for 48 hours. There was an MTV commercial we filmed. Miss Uribe and I were on all local Los Angeles news stations presenting Project 10 and its critical importance. There were so many newspaper and television spots that I have lost count. I shared my experience and feelings and the urgency of what was needed to all youth. At that time, it was also about saving lives, as AIDS was sweeping through the gay community, destroying everyone out in its path. I was given the greatest chance at life and a future. I went from failing in school and the prospects being bleak at best for my adulthood to being asked to speak at my Fairfax High School graduation. There was a boy who spoke of coming from South Africa in the time of apartheid with his experience. There was another boy from North Korea who spoke of being given a new opportunity. At the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, California, I joined those voices with my own experience, strength, and hope in completing my high school education. My words came from humble and pure gratitude. Miss Uribe handed me the life vest when the ship was sinking. There are angels that walk amongst us. For myself, my firm belief, through divine intervention, an angel radiated through Miss Uribe.